Excellent. So as I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted, it's so lovely to see you all. Thank you all very, very much for coming along. Massive thank you to the Bill Lord Award finalists, because it's really, really exciting to have you all here. I know it's a right old effort to apply for an award like this, and that feels like an awful lot to ask you to do after having finished your research and your master's courses, to then start to apply for something like this. So we're really grateful that you have done. So thank you very much for that. And thank you for coming along tonight and sharing your research for us, because we're so excited to hear a little bit more about it. You'll all know about Bill Law. Bill Law is such a mighty figure, I guess, in our field. And he was also one of the founders of NICEC. So that's why we have a sort of particular place in our heart for him. He died in 2017, and as NICEC, we were just thinking about a way that we could kind of, I suppose, just keep his memory alive for us. I think there was something of that in it, and to honour him a little bit, I think, to honour his legacy. And Bill was such a big fan of supporting people and kind of, you know, career education and training people to be career guidance practitioners and research and sort of practical applications of research. And this feels like exactly the kind of thing that he'd have really enjoyed. And I think he'd have loved to hear it all, to read all your research and hear all your talks tonight. So it's very sad that he's not with us, but it's lovely that we're able to kind of honour his memory in that way. So from one intellectual powerhouse to another, I'd also like to welcome Jenny Bimrose here tonight. Again, you'll all have heard of Jenny Bimrose, who's contributed such a lot to our field in so many different ways. We're really, really grateful that you've come along, Jenny, tonight. I know that you were writing your slides on the plane to Verona on your holidays, so we're really grateful for that kind of effort. I remember, Jenny, speaking to Nellika. You remember you worked with Nellika, didn't you, at UEL? And I did as well. And Nellika, I remember in the very early days telling me, Jenny, that you were you were sort of really committed to kind of supporting early career researchers and the training of people within our field. And that's kind of, I think, what we're seeing here tonight with you. So thank you very much for coming along. We really appreciate it. So let me just tell you what we've got on tonight, and then I can sort of be quiet for a little bit and hand over to some people who've got something important to say. So first of all, we're going to have Jenny doing her keynote speech about research in the sector. And then after that, there'll be a little bit of time for questions. Not a massive amount of time for questions, but there will be a few. But do please use the chat function as we go along, so you can kind of chatter away with each other. And if you've got some questions, do pop them in the chat, and I'll keep an eye on that whilst Jenny is talking. And if we've got time, I'll be able to pose a couple of those to Jenny. After that, then we're going to have our Bill Law Award finalists doing their 3-minute theses. So I've asked them all to give me one slide each, and they have literally 3 minutes, and I'm going to be really ruthless about that, so that they can just give us a little bit of an insight into their research, which would be fabulous. And then after that, I'll be handing it over to Jill, who's got a list of the award winners, so she'll be able to announce those tonight. Before I hand over to Jenny, I just want to do a big shout. Oh, actually, I want to do 2 big shout outs. First of all, to everybody's supervisors. So every bit of research that we're listening to tonight is obviously, you know, the researcher gets the big credit, but it is nice to note the kind of wind between the the wind beneath their wings. So a big shout out to the supervisors who have supported the students on their way. And my other big shout out is to the other judges. So Rosie and Elnaz, who've joined us this year, and Rosemary and Janet, who've been working on the Bill Law Award for some time. Just a real appreciation of the amount of time and effort and thought and generosity that you put into it. So thank you very much for that. Right, Jenny, are you happy to take the reins?
I am.
Right.
Hope you can hear, yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you perfectly. Let me just see. There we go. Can you see that? Let me start that.
I can.
Has that worked? Can you all see that? Jill, can you give me a thumbs up if that's working? Yeah, okay, fabulous. Jenny, over to you.
Thank you. And thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here and part of your celebration this evening. It is a fantastic achievement to have 11 people nominated for this award. So I'm very, very pleased to be here to support that. And when I was approached to do this session, I'm in the middle of writing a chapter for a book on qualitative research. And so I thought this would be a good opportunity to share some of my thoughts with you about qualitative research. I'll just give you a very quick pen sketch of myself. I started off actually in research and then went into practice as a careers advisor, and then trained career practitioners at University of East London, not sure what that voice is about, and then went to Warwick 20 odd years ago to do research. So that that career trajectory was very complementary in terms of the research, the practice, and the training. So could we have the first slide, please? Right, so the objectives I came up with for the session. Can I just check that have I got 30 minutes or is it less than that?
30 minutes to do nicely, Jenny.
Okay, well, I'll try to speak for not more than 25 to give a few minutes for questions. What I wanted to do was think about the relationship between research and professional status, because I think one of the questions I used to ask myself when I was engaged in my career in research is, what are we doing this for? So I want to revisit the whole professional status issue. I want to think about funding sources, because as a researcher for 22 years, that was something that was always front and center, and it has a massive impact in all sorts of ways. And then I wanted to look at the dominance of quantitative career research and career guidance. And then finally, think about the role of research for what I think is an increasingly important social equity agenda in career practice. So that's what I'm going to be doing over the next 20-25 minutes. Next, please. So the research and profession is the first thing I want to think about. Thank you. And we all know what research is. I'm not going to rehearse that with this audience because you're all very familiar with it, but just very quickly, what research is a process of inquiring into a question or problem and its outcome. It's also a discipline and a set of values that's concerned very much with truth and impartiality. It is also the basis for theory. Next, please. So profession. So what are we thinking about when we talk about? Let me just get rid of that. Profession. And there are lots of definitions around profession, and this is the one that kind of does it for me, I think, most of all. So it's a disciplined group of individuals who adhere to ethical standards and who hold themselves out as and are accepted by the public as possessing special knowledge and skills in a widely recognized body of learning derived from research, education and training at a high level, and who are prepared to apply this knowledge to exercise these skills in the interests of others. Okay, next, please. So a body of knowledge and a basis for theory. So we have this kind of golden interrelationship between research and theory, which is reciprocal and cyclical, because you can't have theories for practice without research on which the theory is based and from which it is developed. So hopefully you can start seeing the interrelationship of these different domains. Next, please. So you have this integration of research, theory and practice with profession and professionalism at the centre. I think within career guidance, certainly in my experience, we do tend to regard ourselves as a profession. And I know the CDI at the moment is revisiting the whole issue of professional status, which is quite elusive in many respects. But I think when we think about being a profession and a professional within that profession, we need to remember that the obligations that actually visits upon us in terms of the theory, research and practice interrelationship. Okay, next, please. So funding research, which may feel a bit like a wild card to you people, why does she want to talk about research? But having spent over 20 years in research, I'm very conscious that it's absolutely critical to being a researcher and producing high quality research which can be used for practice. Next, please. So thinking about social scientific inquiry, of course, career guidance falls within that broad remit. It seems to me that there are a couple of main sources of funding. You can undertake contract research, or you can undertake grant unfunded research. And within those two different broad domains, we have policy, evaluation, and blue sky. And again, I'll be looking at that fairly quickly. Okay, next, please. So first of all, the difference between blue skies and contract research. And I'm guessing that what all of you guys have been doing is the blue skies research as part of your educational journeys. And that is when people make the problems that are studied. So you're the ones who actually devise the research questions, the research agenda, the structure, how it's going to be, the methodology, how it's actually going to be conducted, how it's going to be written up, etc. So you're the one who's leading on that. And generally, blue skies researchers position themselves independently and will undertake analysis of a whole range of different sorts of social issues. On the other side, though, the contract researcher, which I guess I was for most of my research career in career guidance, is that you take the problems to be studied. They are contracted to you by a funder. So what you're effectively doing is responding to the agendas and to the priorities of others. And those others are generally governments, government departments, or other types of funders, which can be sort of organizations, charities, all sorts, a whole range of different types of organizations. Okay, thanks. So the skies research, let's think about what that can actually achieve. It arouses interest, it provides insights, it provokes debate, but sadly, the truth and reality is that it rarely has an influence on policy and therefore on practice. It's very hard to get blue skies research integrated into policy and practice. On the other hand, though, contract research is supposed to be all about impact and is often judged on the, excuse me, the degree of impact that it has on particular audiences. Very often, it's addressing an evidence-based agenda. It's about influencing public opinion, economic climate, manifestos, etc. So it's very clear that when you're contracted to do research, they want a result, and they want a result that can actually be implemented into policy and practice. Okay, next one, please. So, blue skies again, not to underestimate its values. It can, and I'm sure we'll hear this evening when we hear the 11 nominees for the award, that it provides us with deeper understandings, which can be absolutely invaluable. It provides insights. It can reveal the levels of complexity that are inherent in different issues that are being studied. And it's often, carried out within a broader context. Thanks. Contract funded research, commissioned, as I've said, by a private public organisation. It has a very specific need, which tends to be either evaluative, evidence-based, or confirmatory. And it has very, very clear boundaries with objectives and a design that can be specified, or at least partially specified. Excuse me. Next one, please. So for the contract funded research, which is about policy, the sorts of questions that it tends to be addressing is what works and why, how can we raise standards in this particular domain, how do we increase effectiveness of a service, typically a public service, and it's all about exploring new solutions. Next, please. Evaluation, which has really risen up the agenda over the past decade or so, again, contract funded. And what evaluation research is about is looking at assessing the extent to which a particular policy is being met, looking at the assessment of impact, looking perhaps at success factors, barriers and risks, and coming up with future recommendations. So if you think of that in relation to our field, career guidance, these are the sorts of research agendas that evaluation research will specify for the contract researcher. Okay, thank you. Right, so having done a zip through the type of funding that we have, and I haven't really got time here to consider the impact of the different types of funding sources, but I'm sure much of it will, be kind of pretty self-evident to you in terms of the amount of freedom that you have as a blue skies researcher, which is real luxury, compared with contract research, which has many more constraints and breaks, I think, on what you're able to do. So then just let's think about quantitative approaches, because if we think about our field, and I was doing a scan through of the 11 presentations that we're having this evening, and it does seem as if many of them, quantitative research, many of the awards are founded, based in qualitative approaches. But just let's look at some of the statistics around the balance between quantitative approaches and qualitative approaches. So from a study was published in 2012, which looked at the period from 1990 to 1999, undertook a content analysis of qualitative research in career development, finding that only 6.3 of articles across 11 journals use qualitative methods. That's Graham Stead and colleagues. Confirmatory evidence of this was another study that was undertaken from 1989 to 2003, which found that only 4.6% of the total number of empirical articles in the Journal of Counselling Psychology use qualitative methods. In 2023, we have an article published by Binnington and colleagues who'd undertaken content analysis of articles published in the Journal for Vocational Behaviour over the past 23 years, finding extremely scant attention having been paid to qualitative methodologies. And another article that was published in 2021 found that research using qualitative methods linked to articles with the fewest citations, which I think is something that we perhaps can pick up in terms of practice later on. Okay, thank you. Can we go into the next slide, please? However, things are beginning to change, and I think they're beginning to change because of the impetus provided by the social equity agenda in our field. So in 2017, and I'm taking the American Psychological Association because I think they are a fairly dominant force in terms of professional bodies and taking the lead on things like sort of research and policy in the field. And in 2017, the APA, for the first time, included qualitative inquiry in Division 5, changing the name of the division from evaluation, measurement and statistics to quantitative and qualitative methods. So I think that was the first formal recognition by a body with the importance and stature of the APA, basically saying that this is an area to which we need to pay more attention and give more credit. As a result of this change, what has been found is that between 2018 and 2022, there has been a modest increase in the number of qualitative articles reported in publications. But what they also found was a potential decrease in the quality. Perhaps as a result of this, or in tandem with this, in 2021, principles were published by the APA to support the quality of qualitative approaches. And new journals were introduced, like the APA introduced a journal called Qualitative Psychology, and the British Psychological Society introduced the Journal of Qualitative Psychology. So we have some major shifts sort of in thinking and practice in our field around quantitative approaches. Can we go on to the next one, please? When you look at the evidence that we have around the balance between qualitative and quantitative approaches in our field, there is no doubt that funding qualitative research is much more challenging than most quantitative research. And even where grant awarding bodies have encouraged qualitative methods, these are often in practice marginalized with the aims expressed quantitatively. And that was published in an article just last year. So the use of qualitative research can help to address current weaknesses in influencing public policy arenas, though they are often still regarded as inadequate, with the substantial research budgets necessary to carry out high quality quantitative research often not existing. So there's a bit of a double whammy there. So the rhetoric is catching up, saying we need to do more of this, and it has a massive contribution to make to our field. But on the other hand, the practice is still lagging somewhere behind. Okay, so if we think finally about the qualitative research and the social equity agenda, okay, I think I've already mentioned that I think there's an increasing acknowledgement that qualitative research does actually have something to contribute to our field, in particular to the social justice agenda. And it can be particularly valuable when principles of equity, access, participation, and of harmony for culturally diverse populations are prioritized. I think, one of the great strengths of qualitative research is the way in which it produces contextual meaning and rich, thick descriptions of lived experience. And with that, potentially comes the power to influence practice, advocacy, and public policy. So it really does have the potential to contribute to social change and structural equality. Okay, thank you. I don't want to spend too much time on promoting qualitative approaches. I am a qualitative researcher and very conscious of its advantages. It increases cultural understanding and can foster social change. It helps us, I think, very importantly, to listen to marginalized voices and ask very difficult questions and examining social dynamics to achieve justice. And it also, I think, legitimizes scientific inquiry in our field as a contextualized process, which can value multiple ways of knowing, which I think is really, really important. You know, it's sometimes a hard struggle to get people in the field to value other ways of knowing, like qualitative research. Okay, can we go on to the next slide, please? Just last year, Sultana highlighted the need for research that attends to unique circumstances, contexts, cultures, and systems that characterize the career development of disadvantaged groups. And he referred to this in and I think, a very poignant way as the need to attend to localisms and particularisms. So giving voice to the importance of this type of research to helping with these sorts of agenda. I think there is a gap undoubtedly exists in our understanding of the experiences of individuals existing at that intersection of social disadvantage. And certainly when I undertook, and it was blue skies research, it was unfunded, into the career development of women with Mary McMahon and Mark Watson. The book was published in 2015, and we worked across 9 countries with older women, interviewing older women about their career trajectory. And this was such a powerful way of demonstrating the individual experiences of these women. Very, very powerful. So qualitative research provides the means for the in-depth exploration that quantitative research often kind of overlooks, and can help us to explore the impact of intersectionality. Those of you, I'm sure you're all familiar with the term of intersectionality. So I think we continue to sideline it at our peril. Okay, so if we could go to one of the final slides. I think overall, what I'm arguing is the need for a paradigm shift from studying participants with an objective lens, which is predominantly what has happened in our field to date, shift it to an understanding gained by questioning assumptions, values, and power dynamics inherent to knowledge claims. I think we're way overdue on that one. Okay, so, whoops. I think so what I'm arguing for is new, although qualitative research isn't new, a different approach, which I'm very conscious is difficult to implement. But there have been so many scholars and voices in our field, influential scholars and in our field, who have argued more and more powerfully and more persistently over the last decade or so for career guidance to pursue a social justice agenda. And in order to do that, we have to adopt research methods and agendas that focus on contexts and narratives of disadvantaged groups. So David Bluestein is a very strong advocate of this kind of shift in research practice in our field. Okay, so I think that brings me kind of fairly neatly to some final reflections. And what research needs doing. And I've talked about the social equity agenda, which is such an important agenda at the moment with everything that's going on in the world. And looking at the different critiques of the dominance of quantitative approaches in our field, it does become very apparent that our field needs to engage with internationalization and interdisciplinary research. There is a huge need for capacity building in the field, and this evening is a celebration of that in small measure, I have to say, given the size of the field, but we need a lot more of it because as practitioners and managers in the field, we understand the sort of questions that need to be asked and the research that needs to be done. But very often what typically happens is that when people have finished their educational qualification, that's probably the end of their research activities, because it is so difficult to combine research with practice. So I think the whole central thrust of my arguments this evening has been to advocate for more tolerance of and embracing qualitative approaches in a much greater way than we have done before in the career guidance field. We need to think about funding because we can't do the research that we need to do unless the funding's available. And as I said, qualitative research is expensive to do, especially if you want to do longitudinal research, which was possibly the most powerful. And as a professional field, we need to be advocating for funding to undertake research agendas that we feel need doing. And perhaps we also need to attend more to the impact and dissemination agenda. We need to get our messages out. This is not a new thought, but we need to pursue this with great rigor, because there's not a lot of point in having good research findings that we're not getting targeted in the wider domain. Okay, well, thanks for listening, and I think we probably do have a few minutes for questions, if anybody wants to come back on any of that.
Well, Jenny, that was fantastic. That was so thought-provoking and resonated so much with a lot of the stuff that I think many of us kind of recognise. So thank you very much for putting it in such a kind of neat, clear and thought-provoking way. I've got a whole bunch of questions myself, but let me go to the chat to see if anybody else has got any coming through. Are there any questions? So Jenny, whilst people are perhaps thinking about it, can I ask you one, which is really about a call to action really for us? So a lot of the stuff you're talking about, I would, wholeheartedly support, but I'm not necessarily in control of that. I'd love the funding bodies to be keener on qualitative research. I'd love people to cite it more and respect it more. But what do you think what can we do as a group of practitioners or researcher practitioners or as NICEC? What do you feel are things that we could practically do?
It's a tough one. I mean, it's a bit like rolling a boulder up a hill, isn't it? Trying to achieve all of these aims and objectives. But I think even if as a body or as a profession or as a community of practice, we can think and share, which we're doing already, the sorts of research agendas that need carrying out and really critically need carrying out. I think advocacy is something that we really need to engage with. We have to somehow talk to the people who can influence the funding decisions. And in other areas of research, this is absolutely all too commonplace, that researchers develop relationships, long-term relationships with policymakers and funders. And I'm not suggesting that hasn't happened in the past at all. I mean, that has happened in the past and in some cases very effectively. But I'm not sure that the kind of research agendas that we have been advocating are necessarily sort of helping with the broader message that I've been, talking about. I mean, we have a great deal of quantitative research findings, and I mean always the discouraging conclusion that can be made is that while it's made an impact, it hasn't actually made the sorts of impacts that we hoped it would in terms of getting policymakers to change their mind and fund our services. So that needs to be, I think, revisited, re-engaged with, and perhaps with that, the other voice, sort of qualitative research actually complementing quantitative approaches. So I think, yes, I mean, we all have responsibility as a profession to advocate for the kind of research funding that we need. And it is really tough to do it, I know from experience.
Hello, Nick. So you around? You've got a lovely question in the chat, but I just wondered if you wanted to, if you can, there we go. Lovely. Do you want to put your question to Jenny directly?
I have just felt more hopeful recently, Jenny, about the sector taking more of a lead and not relying on government-based funded research. And maybe it's activities like this that encouraged me, but I just wondered over the sweep of your career whether you're feeling more hopeful now or less hopeful. I know what answer I want.
I think over the sweep of my career, I mean, I think one of the characteristics of the career community is its tenacity. And over, it's 40 or 50 years now since I've been around it in one capacity or another. We've had setbacks, we've had some gains, we've, sort of had successes and all the rest of it. But when you say, at this moment in time, I think maybe we're on the cusp of something. We have a general election next week, and we have a whole new challenge and perhaps a whole new opportunity to start thinking about influencing. And I know people in related academic fields who are already lobbying political parties who they think are going to be successful, lobbying really hard for attention for particular research agendas and the funding to go with it. So, we could very well, and it may be that there are people in the field, I mean, I'm now retired, are actually engaged in doing this already. I'm not gainsaying that. So we are a tenacious bunch. We keep going irrespective of setbacks. And I think, where we are now is great testimony to that tenacity. But I think we also should be excited about the opportunities on the horizon for us. But let's not wait and see what happens. Let's try to make a few things happen.
Jenny, I think that feels like a really lovely, lovely, optimistic and positive and proactive note to end on. So there are a few more comments in the chat. Maybe if you've got a minute, Jenny, I'm sure they'd be delighted if you replied to them. But let's finish this part of the evening with just thanking you enormously, Jenny, for sharing your, yes, exactly, for sharing your time and your wisdom with us, and also for giving us such a lot of interesting and valuable food for thought. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now let's turn to our finalists tonight. I think this is such a lovely illustration of, Jenny was talking about the value of qualitative research, and we've got some just marvelous bits of qualitative research to share tonight. And I think this is such a great illustration of how qualitative research can be so interesting, and it can give a voice to people who don't get a voice. And that feels like one of the really, really valuable things that it can do. So I think we've got 11 of you to get through, which is quite a lot. And that's why I'm going to be so ruthless and vicious with my timing. I've got 3 minutes on my watch, and I'm going to leave my sound on so that the noise will just echo across the virtual room when your 3 minutes is up. I've put you in order alphabetically based on your first names. So there's nothing to read into the order in which I've done it. So let me see if I can find you the 3-minute theses. There we go. So Excellent. So Amanda Potts, are you there? You're University of Warwick. I'm not sure who
I am.
who
I'm
was
here.
supervising you with your research, Amanda?
Sorry, I didn't catch that,
Who
Julia.
was supervising your research?
It was Phil McCash.
Fabulous. Is he here tonight? Has he been able to come along?
I'm not sure. I've not seen him on the participants list. I'm not sure though.
We should report back. Right, Amanda, 3 minutes starts now. Over to you.
My research was on the role of the university academic tutor, also known as personal tutor or academic advisor, as a source of career support to students. I did this because I felt that from my own experience as an academic tutor, as well as a careers consultant, that I had an interesting insight into the real influence that academic tutors have on students' career thinking. And I wanted to explore this further through the lens of careers theory. My literature review highlighted that this is a very under-researched area, so it is also much needed given the impact it could have on the development of practice. So I implemented a case study of an HE institution, 2 departments were selected within it, and I collected data through semi-structured interviews with an academic tutor, student and careers consultant linked to each department, as well as collecting institutional documentary evidence. Data was analysed using reflexive thematic analysis. So I found that careers conversations within the academic tutoring relationship are taking place, but they're not always labelled as such. For example, one academic tutor said that they never had career conversations, but then when we explored this further, they said that they did ask, what are your plans for next year? What are you going on to do? Academic tutors' enthusiasm for discussing careers with students varied, and this impacts students' perceptions of the place of career conversations within the relationship. Students valued it, but didn't expect it. In addition, careers consultants highlighted the impact of the individual academic tutor in role. So, applying community interaction theory's modes of influence, we can see that an expectation is created about the level of support available from academic tutors, and this is influenced by the way that attitudes to careers provision are modelled. Students are receiving feedback from academic tutors when career issues are raised, and if the academic tutor encourages discussions about their career, then a student is more likely to explore this further with them. So in terms of systems theory framework, the student's lack of expectation around careers discussions from academic tutors suggests a social system within which career support is not prioritised. I also found that academic tutors can have significant influence on students' career thinking. So you can see the quote on the slide there. And this shows the power of that role. Students really value this relationship and the input from their academic tutor. In this context, the careers service was seen as the other, and the students' departmental identity really came through in the interviews. Indeed, the influence of that departmental culture was very evident, and it impacted on the delivery of academic tutoring. Through the lens of careership, careers provision for students could be improved by acknowledging the academic tutor's power to influence through initiating careers discussions. But if the academic tutor does not engage in this, then the student's horizons for actions are limited. So my key recommendations are that institutional academic tutoring policies need to outline that academic tutors will open up career discussions with students. Training for academic tutors to deliver this is needed, and there's a really crucial role for careers consultants here because they need to advocate for the influential role of academic tutors and be involved in delivering that training. And we really need further studies to strengthen the research base and to continue to explore this under-researched area of work.
Amanda, that was fabulous. Just on the 3 minutes.
Was it?
And what a super way to start. That was so interesting. And you were really beautifully illustrating Jenny's idea about theory and research kind of working together. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, now we've got our other Amanda. Amanda Roberts, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly. And you were working with Janet, is that right?
Working with Janet Sheath, yes. Hello, Janet.
Right, take it away.
Right, so my research was around the drivers and experiences of midlife women lawyers returning to the legal profession. And I guess the significance of this for me was the broader picture of increasing lifespans, kind of extending people's working lives, and the government's initiatives to encourage over 50s back to work, and as well as the campaigns by the Law Society to tackle inequalities in the legal profession. And from a research perspective, the background was really the lack of literature around older women's careers, and also studies suggesting that women often return, when you take a break, they often return to a different role after a break. And that made me quite curious about what made women return to the same career. So I carried out a qualitative study of 11 women between 43 and 63, and I identified themes which are presented in this slide as a kind of model to help employers and coaches unravel the complexities of career transitions for midlife women. So the drivers to return came under headings, a couple of headings. Of one of it's all about time, and that reflects the embeddedness of decisions in both past events, but also possible futures. And these futures were kind of feared. So, you know, what else would I be good for? I'll just be good at making cupcakes, or sort of hoped for this kind of unfinished business. And there was also a sense of urgency, which is it's about time. That's hence the it's about time, and a sort of a nowness that came with this stage of life. And that was kind of the significance of midlife, I think. Decisions that were also tied up with expectations, societal, to stay at home with children, and individual expectations of themselves to have a challenging career. And for these women, roles were shifting away from domesticity. Their desire to return was seen as a kind of reclaiming of who they once were. And there was a strong sense of identity as a lawyer, which is significant because that this kind of returning to the same career. Common theme around experiences was actually participants were finding a new path. There was a lack of role models, lack of other women doing a similar thing. And in doing this, they had to kind of find ways to fit back in. They had to find ways to fit back into a linear career path. They had to find ways to fit back into an office environment and kind of learn about sort of tech. They had to deal with their own conflicting thoughts about confidence. On the one hand, this sort of confidence that comes with maturity, kind of a wisdom, and they also had to, deal with this fear of lack of confidence because they've taken this gap, and then they had to put up with all these sort of perceptions that they were old or past it, or the perceptions they felt that other people thought that they were old or past it, and then they felt that other people were young and didn't care and weren't being very helpful. So there was all these emotions swimming about as well, which is hence the sort of overarching theme of emotions, and that were often used as a kind of driver. They kept them going, kept them moving forward. Sort of anger, sadness, and fear were very prevalent. So I guess for me, what was particularly significant, I guess sort of a takeaway, is really that the research demonstrate that the midlife's are really a key pivotal time, and also it's not the end of the road for career, and work can offer challenge and connections which obviously benefit midlife individuals.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Amanda. And again, that was a really interesting way of thinking that a research project could genuinely influence policy, couldn't it? Feels very, very linked to the current agenda. Thank you very much. That's brilliant. So we've got Amy Knott now. Amy, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Amy's been feeling a bit under the weather. So Amy, we're particularly glad to see you tonight because we felt it was a bit touch and go. So thank you very much for coming along. And you've been studying at Coventry?
Yes, that's where I did my master's, yeah.
Fantastic. Right, Amy, over to you.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, I got a heavy Zoom filter on just to kind of help me out with that bit. But my research was on TED Talks. Generated from pretty much a personal interest in them, to be honest. And I kind of looked into it a bit, saw some kind of prominent figures, Leanne Hambley, etc., had posted about TED Talks on LinkedIn and blog posts and in books and things like that, but not loads. And then when I looked into the kind of research, there was no research on kind of TED Talk and career development. So yes, I thought, let's fill that gap. There was a bit of research around kind of use of TED Talks in education for English language teaching and also kind of presentation skills, but that was about it. So I placed this research on kind of working out whether other people used kind of TED Talks for kind of their careers practitioners, and I centered this in UK universities, and that's because that's where I work, and I thought I could get a good number of participants to kind of fill in a questionnaire, which I spread on LinkedIn. So my focus of the research was qualitative because yes, there are a few questions that were quantitative focused to find out if TED Talks were being used in careers work, but the main kind of thing that I wanted to know was how and why they're being used. So lots of open-ended questions, and then a thematic analysis completed on the answers, which came up with 3 key themes. So there's a lot of discussion around the format of TED Talks, the kind of stylistic aspects, the kind of duration of them, mixed opinions on this, I would say, but yeah, lots of kind of comments on that area. The second was, do TED Talks have usable and relevant content to careers work? So there was lots of kind of very specific examples of particular TED Talks and how practitioners had used those to do particular activities, spark discussions and so on. So it's clear that there was usable content. And then finally, likability versus credibility. So it was clear that TED Talks are popular amongst both kind of practitioners and clients, but actually it's important to kind of be questioning them. You know, perhaps some people felt were outdated, or perhaps some weren't backed by actual scientific theory. So it's important to engage with them critically when using them in practice. And then some recommendations for practice also came out of here. So it's used as a digital tool. Actually, it's used for helping narrative career theories and helping kind of clients construct different aspects of career. But kind of key questions coming out of it still is a TED Talk particular? Is it the tool that should be being used to kind of promote careers work? And that's it. Oh, sorry. I thought that was my alarm. I had to kind of go in, but I think it's around then. I was just saying, is it a worthwhile tool that should be used in careers work? Are there other tools like things like ChatGPT, LinkedIn Learning was coming up? So should TED Talks be a focus, basically?
Amy, that's such a brilliant thought-provoking question to leave us with. Thank you very much for that.
Thanks.
And well done, Amy, on making it through. Fantastic. Right, Belinda, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you perfectly, and
Yes.
how lovely to see you. And you've been studying
Thank
at
you.
Nottingham Trent, is that right?
Yes, Nottingham Trent University.
Fantastic, brilliant. Right, over to you.
Thank you. So where did this research come from? Basically from a genuine interest that I have in the green economy. So the transition to net zero, natural restoration and climate change mitigation will absolutely lead to a transformation of economic sectors. This will require a growth in green skills and a receptive enough degree roles. Backcasting to ensure that future jobs can be filled is vital to address skills shortages, tackle youth unemployment, and keep the current school population in the loop. The question is how to connect young people with green opportunities and foster an interest and understanding. Now, the literature review, there was an awful lot of information about green career education and guidance. Plant and other academics felt that this could be the bridge. However, there is a lack of empirical evidence of the perceptions and experiences of frontline career practitioners in secondary schools, and the focus of this research is to add their voice. I used a case study research design, which was exploratory and inductive. I used qualitative semi-structured interviews, and a thematic analysis were appropriate. The themes that emerged from career practitioners were that there was confusion around green language, and a lack of information reaching the schools is actually leading to concerns about greenwashing. Understanding tends to be as a technocrat and signposting green jobs to traditional sectors. There were concerns about how a green dimension can be brought into guidance and remain ethical. And there was a general belief that green awareness needs to start early so that values and attitudes are embedded by the time career decisions are made. And that career education needs to precede guidance to dispel myths, stereotypes, and lack of diversity, such as that green jobs are for activists. They do not pay well. They're only for STEM students, and only associated with traditional green sectors. One thing that came out of the research, though, was the creativity of career practitioners, and this absolutely needs to be celebrated. I was humbled by some of the efforts that that practitioners were making to bring a green dimension to their work. There is so much to learn from nature and so much to learn from organisations such as WWF. So the outcomes and implications for practice. This research started with the ideological positions of Watts, the environmental ecology dimensions of Dobson, and the current thinking of career development as a conduit for eco-justice of Irving, Hooley, Sultana, and Packer. The findings have added the perceptions and experience of career practitioners, which was missing, thereby synthesizing theory, research, and practice. And together, these have provided something more than their separate elements, resulting in a nascent green career education and guidance framework with approaches aligned to ideological positions. And my final thoughts, this is not just the decisive decade for the climate, but this is also the economic opportunity of the 21st century. If the profession doesn't evolve, it may very well become dated and disconnected from public and policy thinking, and most importantly, disconnected from the groundswell of environmental concern voiced by a growing youth movement. Thank you.
Thank you, Belinda. It feels like such an important topic, and I love the framework that you've come up with. That was such a brilliant thing to kind of conclude your research with. Right, Claire. So it says they're University of Warwick, but I think you're joining us from La Belle France tonight. Is that right? You in France?
That's right, yes.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for making the effort to join us. So over to you, Claire.
What is the relevance of decolonising the curriculum to career learning in UK higher education? Which map is most familiar to you? Probably the one on the left with its origins in 16th century colonial expansion and navigation. Yet the right-hand contemporary map more accurately portrays the size of the countries with the global south. For example, the continent of Africa shown in correct proportions. The process of decolonising the curriculum challenges us to examine our knowledge, its origins and assumptions. In the UK, many disciplines have engaged with decolonising the curriculum, aspiring to creating a richer knowledge base, challenging the dominance of the global north, and in so doing, countering the perception that there is only one way of knowing and no other narrative or intellectual tradition exists. In UK HE careers services and education of guidance practitioners, however, despite the increasing work with students and staff focused on diversity and anti-racist work, far less attention has been paid to applying the decolonial lens to the underpinning knowledge base of career learning. To do so could strengthen our work, enhancing its applicability to students and staff from diverse backgrounds, and also providing additional ways in which we can connect with disciplines throughout the university. My research therefore examined the relevance and how it might be supported going forward. I undertook 11 narrative interviews with careers practitioners in a variety of UK HEIs and analysed the data through reflexive thematic analysis. From this, key findings include practitioners had a significant awareness of the predominance of Western career theorists and their influence on their work, and the underpinning Western concepts of self and other social constructs to career learning. Very few practitioners have begun to explore reducing the dominance of global North narratives. In addition to theories and models, however, professional knowledge is transmitted through formal and informal peer-to-peer work. Participants also highlighted the continuing need to expand diversity of the guidance workforce to broaden and potentially challenge existing perspectives. Decolonising is also relevant to labour market information, integrating the lived experience of our clients into our knowledge base. Looking ahead, participants felt that creating the time and environment to explore the concept, acknowledging the emotional demands of engagement, plus avoiding assumptions that it is only minoritised staff will be undertaking decolonising work. And there was a great need for support for reappraising and expanding the knowledge which underpins career learning, critiquing what we have at the moment, but also looking at and exploring other ways of knowing and integrating that knowledge into our praxis. The process is not linear. Decolonising career learning is a journey, and we all can engage with this in a variety of ways. My research is foundational. Almost nothing has been written on this area within the UK, and I'm now very ready for others to debate and develop it. Thank you.
That's a great call to action. And I love that idea of kind of multiple realities, that very much linked with what Jenny was saying earlier. So thank you very much for that. Right, Erin, you're joining us from beautiful Loch Lomond.
I am, yes.
And you're studying a PhD at the moment at Glasgow, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Fantastic. Tell us what you found.
So let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, there were young princes and princesses trying to find their way in the world. They were getting fed up with the king and queen always asking what they wanted to be when they grew up, when actually all they really wanted to do was hang out with other princes and princesses and post their new crowns and tiaras on social media. Sometimes they daydreamed of fairy godmothers and magical frogs, and times when they could have castles of their own and cool Insta-worthy jobs with which they could buy awesome new carriages. What they didn't know was they were actually going through a period of brain development where their brains were pruning and enhancing neural pathways that would prepare them to be kings and queens of the future. They didn't know that they were in a key phase to develop who they were in the future, and that's why sometimes they could be grumpy, why they took risks like leaving balls after midnight, or why they slept for far too long, which incidentally was nothing to do with poisoned apples, but their brains needing time to rewire. Many of the darling princes and princesses were coming to the end of school, and these awful decisions were getting far too real. In desperation, the kings and queens advised them to speak to a thing called a careers advisor. They were not sure about this. Careers advisors were old and read books and were therefore dusty and irrelevant and probably wore elbow patches. However, the careers advisor in their kingdom was doing a PhD and wanted to investigate ways to help young people make decisions. This careers advisor knew that emotion and imagination were more sensitive in adolescence and wanted to explore if the princes and princesses would benefit from using stories to help them to find out more about who they were, the world around them, and what their place in that world was. The careers advisor knew that not many people had researched career decision and adolescent brain development and hoped helping them with decision making now would help them to become much happier kings and queens of the future. They had read that the brain uses similar pathways when imagining to actually performing activities, and that story might help the princes and princesses to experience potential futures. So the princes and princesses went to the aforementioned careers advisor and found to their surprise that although they were old and a book reader, they did understand them and were not so dusty after all. The careers advisor helped them to tell stories which allowed them to actually experience their future possible selves, who they might be and who they definitely did not want to be. They could tell stories with film, collage, draw, or write, and they liked this because having choice and making their own decisions was important to them. They found that imagining their future and working through scenarios where they achieved their Insta-worthy jobs, castles and carriages helped them to attain their goals by improving self-control and executive function. The careers advisor didn't wave a magic wand, so definitely was not a fairy godmother, but did help the princes and princesses see who they might like to be in the future and what that future might feel like. Helped them to answer not what they wanted to be, like the other old people had asked them, but who. And that felt like a much better question, with no magical frog in sight, despite a much happier ending. Thank you.
That was absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much for that. And just under time, which is perfect. Such a practical example, Erin. Thank you very, very much for that. Right, Gemma.
Hello.
Are you up in Scotland at the moment?
No, I'm in Kent.
Oh, okay. Other end. Oh, yes, of course, yes. But you're studying in Scotland, is that right?
I get distance learning, yeah.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. Right, Gemma, tell us what you found out.
Perfect. So for anyone following the news at the moment, I think there's no escaping the discussions around international students. So from concerns over the number of students to debates about the length and availability of post-study work visas, it seems that everyone has an opinion. But what's the experience of those higher education careers advisors who support international students on a daily basis? Their voices and experiences really aren't so well heard. And I think there's a really clear gap in the academic literature regarding this. So research demonstrates that international students often choose to study in the UK because of the enhanced employability prospects that they perceive. However, international students and graduates face a unique set of employability challenges, and few UK career services actually have specialist international careers advisors. So as a careers advisor who's been supporting university students for over 10 years now, I'm very aware of the increasing numbers of international students accessing career guidance and the different knowledge and skill set required to support them. And I wanted to know if my experience was similar to the experience of others. So I decided to conduct a qualitative study using in-depth interviews with careers advisors from a variety of different universities who were supporting international students. So I analysed the data using reflective thematic analysis, and what I found was that advisors described the guidance they used with international students as quite different to the guidance they used with domestic students, with more of a navigational method being used. So managing expectations and boundaries was really key, as students often came with very different expectations of what career services could support them with based on their experience in their home country or what they've been told by university recruitment teams. Secondly, international students. The international students advisors were supporting were often mature students with a lot of previous work experience, and they needed advice on the different types of opportunities that were available to them and how to succeed in the UK labour market from a cultural perspective. Advocacy was something that was also incredibly important to careers advisors. They felt that an understanding of visas was a really crucial part of guidance for international students. And they also felt really frustrated that a lot of employers are often not willing to recruit international students. However, what they reported was that both of these things were slightly out with the boundaries of their role. And that was something that caused them some anxiety. So lastly, the advisors also felt their work often wasn't taken seriously in strategies or by their managers, and that they lacked training opportunities in this area. So I think the research has raised really important insights into the experiences of careers advisors working with international students. Pre-arrival guidance and joined up working with recruitment colleagues could help, as I think also better integration with other departments like visa teams. And also considering the role of advocacy in careers advisor job descriptions and thinking about more collaborative ways of working between perhaps employer engagement teams and careers advisors could all be ways forwards, along with just increased support for advisors with a stronger focus on international students within career service and wider university policies, which I think would really enhance training and development opportunities for careers advisors.
Gemma, thank you very much for that. I think for all of those of us working in the university sector, this feels like a very live issue, and it's so great to have some kind of empirical evidence around it. Right, Gillian, you're another University of West Scotland student. Are you there?
I am, yes. Hello.
Fantastic. Lovely to meet you, Gillian. Over to you.
Thank you. So the death of a child goes against the natural order of things. But on average, 8,000 young people aged between 1 day and 30 years old die in the UK each year, leaving behind over 16,000 bereaved working age parents. I'm one of those bereaved parents, having lost my own daughter 4.5 years ago. And through conversations with others, it became very clear that there were very mixed experiences of work and career post-loss. A review of existing literature found very little had been written about bereavement and career, much less the loss of a child. So I chose to research how the loss of a child can impact career decision-making trajectory to help not only others like me, but also to shine a light on a hidden population within society. I undertook a mixed methods online survey with a range of quantitative and 2 qualitative questions. Now, this was emotionally demanding research, and ethical considerations of duty of care, confidentiality and trust were paramount. The survey was launched initially through the Compassionate Friends Facebook group, and with snowball sampling used to share it to an audience more widely. I undertook descriptive statistics and qualitative content analysis of the findings, and those generated 3 broad themes: the depth, severity and longevity of grief symptoms, employer support and perceptions of career. 9 out of 12 of the listed grief symptoms were experienced by 70% of participants in the first 12 months. And notably, after 2 years, 9 symptoms were still being experienced by at least 50% of participants, with anxiety rated highest at both time points. 95% of participants felt that their employer had been unsupportive, with workplace adjustments being offered and withdrawn in the first 12 months. And only 13% of participants felt that there had been no change to their view of the importance of work and career since the death of their child. But only 1 person had spoken to a careers practitioner. So in terms of recommendations for us as a community, building on the career theory of Jennifer Del Corso, she studied unanticipated career interruptions. And we need to have an awareness of levels of trauma, grief and engagement as signals of career readiness. We also have to recognise that a traumatic event such as the loss of a child could be the catalyst for a career change, a physical change and or a psychological shift in attitude towards work and career. And further research needs to be conducted to test Del Corso's theory in relation to bereaved parents. As practitioners, we also need to recognise the depth, severity and longevity of brief symptoms and emotions, recognising how these could influence and hinder career decision-making over a prolonged time period. A study in 2016 noted that 1 in 5 employees is actively grieving at any given time. So a further recommendation is that all career practitioners undertake bereavement training. And finally, my findings found that bereaved parents would benefit from career guidance at some point post-loss, supporting bereaved parents to re-establish that positive relationship with work and career. So I believe we should find or seek opportunities to work in partnership with local employers, offering career services to bereaved employees and others that have experienced those unanticipated career interruptions. That will help support their career decision making and on the back of a traumatic life event. And I'll just leave you with this quote. I wonder who I would have been if you hadn't died. I'm also grieving me. Thank you.
Gillian, what a moving piece of work and what an important piece of work. And that's some quite stark statistics there that show us that really there's an awful lot of additional support and extra research that needs to be done around this. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. Right, Corinne, and we're so grateful that you're joining us from Canada, but you've been studying at the University of Warwick. Are you there, Corinne?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, fantastic. Perfect. Right, over to you.
Thank you very much. So I'm really excited to share insights on my dissertation topic, which, like Belinda, explored the role of environmental concerns in career development and career guidance activities. My research involves surveying 80 strategic leaders across various organizations, and I was trying to understand their views on environmental issues and career guidance, career development activities. So I focused on 3 main research questions, and I did that through a mix of qualitative and quantitative survey questions. I examined these 3 areas, the environmental attitude, the relationship between individuals and their organizations, and what I was mostly interested in was the 3rd area, the potential role of environmental issues in career guidance. So on the first topic, I found that these leaders were really highly engaged with environmental concerns, which is probably not surprising because they answered the survey. And this positive engagement also influenced their relationship with their organization. So there was something about them needing to know that their organization could be trusted to do what they said they were going to do on environmental actions. And also they wanted some desire for work value congruence. So, for example, one respondent noted, an organization's environmental credentials are important to me as this aligns closely with my personal values. But it was the 3rd area that I felt really, I wasn't sure what I was going to learn about. And that was where I was trying to investigate the potential inclusion of environmental concerns in career guidance. And the headline is quite complicated. So some respondents worried that their career development itself might be hindered by these discussions. For example, one person said, my development is my development. So there's really an emphasis that there's a need to protect individual liberty and autonomy. Others felt that there was a role for environmental issues, but they had a lot of preoccupation or barriers around things like their immediate concerns, like the cost of living crisis or their responsibility to their family.
We've just lost her, haven't we? Oh, Corinne, I'm not sure if you can hear us. Oh gosh, we were doing so well, weren't we? Oh, let's just give her another minute. She might come back very shortly. I'll pause the timer. Right. Okay. So, Luke, are you there?
I am, I think.
You're another one from Nottingham-Trent, and it's very lovely to see you here tonight. Very welcome. Right, you've got 3 minutes. Over to you.
Thank you. So my question was, could contextualized selection of students for work experience and mentoring enhance equity of graduate employment outcomes? And the study was a traditional literature review with some systematic features and also incorporating a process of scenario modelling, which supported me to forecast some unintended potential consequences of switching to contextual selection processes. So what is a contextualized process, or CSP? Well, in general terms, it's any selection process that's been differentiated to take account of candidates' unequal starting points. And it's contrasted in this study with the dominant meritocratic processes that we're all familiar with, and a more widespread method of redistribution that's used in practice ring fencing. So where did the question come from? Well, really, it was me noticing that CSPs are being widely used by universities in admissions and increasingly by graduate recruiters. By not using them in the middle, are we therefore missing an opportunity to further level the playing field prior to students entering the graduate labour market? So to break it down into two bits, where's the evidence that participation in these opportunities actually leads to high-skilled graduate employment? Based on my search, there is no golden thread. That's one of the main findings. First up, there's a lack of empirical evidence relating to the effects of career mentoring on university students, full stop. Secondly, there are so many types of work experience, and researchers are unable to take a broad view because they only have access usually to one or two institutions' participation data. And third, few studies adequately account for self-selection, i.e. the overrepresentation of the most privileged and academically able students. Those that do investigate different outcomes unhelpfully, and those can include academic attainment, employment destinations, and looking at self-reporting of benefits by students and employers. So part two, could the CSPs actually help to enhance equity of graduate outcomes? Well, given what I've just said, it's difficult to be sure. However, the research does suggest that done well, they're more inclusive than other approaches, for example, those based on merit or defined eligibility criteria. However, they can only be effective if the data used to calibrate them is valid, and that's a real problem in higher education because most practitioners are stuck with their institution's WP indicators, which have been designed to reflect educational and not labour market disadvantage. Additionally, it's crucial that the CSPs are not allowed to fall at the final hurdle due to selector bias. And in practice, this will mean providing selectors with education around relevant social theory, having clear and appropriate final decision-making criteria, and deciding in advance what behavioural change is going to look like. So to round off, no one doubts, generally speaking, that work experience and mentoring are good things, but the evidence base is currently not there to support claims that participation boosts individuals' chances of progressing to high-skilled employment. Institutions might take the view that it's worth switching anyway from an ethical standpoint, but this must not be done on a whim. And by extension, we must extend our commitment to contextualisation throughout the life cycle of the opportunity, with the aim of supporting all participants to derive maximum benefit.
Luke, thank you so much for that. And again, that sort of speaks to some of the things that Jenny was talking about before, and that idea of sort of social justice, I guess, within career guidance. So thank you very much. And Priscilla, are you there? Priscilla's our last one tonight. Are you there, Priscilla?
Hi, Julia.
So Priscilla studied with me at City, so I'm particularly excited to see you, Priscilla. I know you'll study quite well, but I'm still delighted to hear you talk about it in this context. So Priscilla, over to you.
I suffered from really bad burnout. There was days where I'd wake up and I'm crying. I'm having a panic attack, and it's because I felt like I wasn't good enough. This is the voice of one of the women I spoke to whilst researching the intersection of race, gender, and neurodiversity, specifically looking at the enablers and barriers for Black dyslexic women progressing into leadership roles. Dyslexia affects 1 in 10 people in the UK, according to the NHS. Yet when it comes to employment in the UK, the Office of National Statistics reports that people with severe or specific learning difficulties had the lowest employment rates, and those with disabilities were less likely to work as managers, directors, or senior officials in comparison to non-disabled working people. In addition, while there have been some strides for women in leadership, Black women are still underrepresented at top levels. My study aimed to highlight these intersectional challenges and how they impact the progression of these women into leadership roles and add to the lack of research around the subject. I based my study on Kimberly Crenshaw's intersectionality theory, which shows the systemic inequalities overlap. I also used the critical race theory, which explores the presence of racism and how ignoring race actually diminishes the experiences of people of color in the workplace. For this research, I use IPA, This approach allowed me to dive deep into the personal experiences of 6 dyslexic Black women aged 30 to 55 who hold senior positions. By focusing on their individual stories, I could better understand their unique perspectives. The 4 key themes that came out of my interviews were identity as a barrier. So the women felt their race and gender took precedence, and many felt they had to downplay their Blackness to fit in at work. Also, the secret being dyslexia. Most of the women didn't disclose their dyslexia because they feared additional stigma. This fear wasn't just at work, but also within their communities, often resulting to imposter syndrome. Some of the enablers I found was helping hands, such as mentorship and sponsorships, which are quite essential. Support from mentors, whether it's within their communities or outside, helped them navigate their careers. And also mastering one's destiny, accepting their dyslexia, being open about it, was a huge turning point for these women. Understanding their neurodiversity allowed them to use their unique strengths effectively in leadership roles. So what does this all mean? These women face triple jeopardy of ableism, racism, and sexism, making it tough to climb the leadership ladder. Discrimination and the pressure to conform to a predominantly white and male culture are significant barriers. On a personal level, the fear of disclosing their dyslexia and internalized negative stereotypes also held them back. Here are some implications to put into practice. So for organizations, investing in dyslexic-friendly tools, reasonable adjustments, creating mentoring programs, and the use of blind recruitment to reduce bias. Also making the application process more neuro-friendly. For career practitioners, the use of intersectionality theory to understand the client's challenges better, and to encourage clients to advocate for workplace adjustments and help them understand their work environmental needs, and also to understand that everyone's experiences are all unique.
Priscilla, thank you so much for that. That was so interesting, and so interesting and sad to hear that impact of that intersectionality on these women. Thank you very much for that. Now, Corinne, are you there? Have you managed to come back and join us?
Yes, I'm so sorry. That seems really bad luck.
I'm so pleased. Are you happy to sort of start up again where you left off? I think you were about halfway through.
Okay, so I absolutely, thank you very much for that. So I think hopefully you got to the point where you knew there were 3 areas I was looking at. The area I was most interested in was around what is the role for, if there is one, for environmental issues within guidance. And the headline is, it's complicated. People are interested or concerned about their individual liberty, what will happen if they have to have this sort of conversation, and it might have an effect on their personal autonomy to choose their career. But those who thought there could be a role saw that there was a clear association with choosing their employer or thinking about decision making. So there was something about, I would like more information at those points to be able to make those decisions. And also others thought there could be a link with setting career development aims that were linked to organizational sustainability goals. So what does this mean? I mean, like Belinda, I found there was a lot of usefulness in looking at Tony Watt's socio-political ideologies because of the sort of different spaces that people seem to be at, concerned about how individuals might affect change, concerned about how we might create system change. So a real broad range there. And so I looked at that through the themes that had come out of my analysis from the content. And really what I learned was that people are working in very different spaces when it comes to their readiness for change. And as a result, we as practitioners will really need to be prepared to work in each of those different spaces, whether that's the more progressive and radical spaces where we can try to work to have impact, or whether we need to be working in the conservative and liberal spaces and thinking about how we move to more progressive and radical spaces. So overall, climate change is a really complicated problem, so we probably shouldn't be surprised that the solution is quite complicated. And I think the next stage in research will need to be thinking about what does that look like in practice? How does it actually work to incorporate that into our conversations? So Belinda and I need to go offline and figure that out together. Thank you. Sorry about that.
I'm so glad you were able to come back and join us. That's fantastic. And so interesting, isn't it, that you and Belinda were both looking at the same sort of topic and indeed picked the same kind of theoretical framework for it. Very impressive scope of your study as well there, Corinne, with 80 people involved. That was fabulous. Right, so I think that's everybody. I hope I haven't forgotten anything. Let me stop sharing my screen. Try to get rid of the dog. Sorry about that. And now we've got 5 minutes left, and it's over to you, Jill, for the exciting task of announcing the award winners. Of course, you're all winners. They honestly were. I mean, you've heard them. They honestly were all absolutely fabulous studies, and yeah, I'm really glad that we got the opportunity tonight for you to present them to a wider audience. I'd love to get all of them to an even wider audience. But perhaps we can talk about that another time. So Jill, over to you for the big reveal.
Thank you, Julia. Here I am with my virtual envelope. And just to add, as Chair of NICEC, my thanks to everyone who's participated in the award over the last year, the students doing the research. I'm just blown away by the range and the scope and the commitment and the fascinating findings that we've heard about tonight. Really great event, but also thanks to the NICEC Fellows who pull the award together every year. Particularly Julia, who at the helm of that, but everyone who's been involved in. See, I'm not sticking to 3 minutes, am I? Unlike all the students who did a brilliant job of working to time and showcasing the benefits of that format. Anyway, lots of love to everybody because it's all marvellous. But my job tonight is to let you know what decisions the judges came to about the entries for the award. And we've got 2 highly commended studies. And so I'll tell you about those first. The first of those is Gemma Witts from University of West Scotland. With her study on international students that we've heard about, HE careers advisors and international students, which the judges really valued as an important and very good quality piece of research. They particularly commended you, Gemma, for your in-depth analysis and the way that you used the quotes from your analysis to give the participants a voice. So very well done to you, Gemma. I'm sure we could all give virtual or actual rounds of applause. And the second highly commended study was Amanda Ward from Birkbeck, and which we heard about earlier this evening. Honestly, there's been so much interesting research going across my screen tonight, but that was really interesting, looking at midlife women lawyers and returning to refocusing on their legal careers after having taken a break, which was really impressively rigorous and which has significant policy implications. And what the judges really valued, Amanda, was the thematic map, which could be really useful for practitioners. And so that's something that they wanted to commend you for. So well done to you, Amanda. And finally, this year's overall winner, and I'm delighted to announce that the overall winner is Belinda Nuttall from Nottingham Trent University with the Green Education and Guidance study based on English secondary schools. Really strong piece of innovative and successful research with real application to practice and really creative integration of existing literature. So the judges felt this was a really important piece of work, as I think we've all acknowledged tonight. Lots of scope for wider publication and application, and aligns really well with the sustainability theme of the upcoming NICEC conference next week. So very well done to you, Belinda. Your prize is a £50 book token. So plenty of more careers textbooks and theoretical publications that you can access, or maybe one, I don't know, they seem publisher pricing seems to be interesting at the moment. Anyway, a book token and free access to NICEC events over the next 12 months, and publication will work with you around publishing your findings in the NICEC journal, to which, of course, you are all welcome to submit your work. And I'm sure Julia and the other judges will be in discussion with you about that in the future. So, what an amazing evening! What a brilliant way to, what a brilliant start to the week.
Could I just say something, Jill?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I'd just like to say how amazing the work is that all these researchers have done. I mean, I've been blown away with all of that you've done, and I know I've used this word before, but I am absolutely humbled to have won this amongst this great group of people. I'd also like to say a really big thank you to Jo McFadden from Nottingham Trent, who coached, challenged, and guided me through doing this piece of research. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Belinda. I didn't want to put you on the spot there, but it is nice to hear your response, your acceptance speech, as it were. So I'll hand back to Julia now, who I'm sure wants to wrap up the event in her characteristic warm style.
Oh, thank you, Jill. Well, just a massive thanks to everybody who was involved, everybody who's come along tonight, everybody who supported the students and the researchers in the wings. A huge congratulations to the award winners, but also, honestly, just congratulations to you all. It's an amazing achievement, actually, just finishing a master's, even more so if you're working on a PhD. And I think to have got it to this stage, I hope you feel really, really proud of the work that you've done. And yeah, really happy to talk to any of you about trying to get it published, because I do think the work deserves to be out there. So well done, everybody. Enjoy your Monday evenings. Let's hope the sun keeps shining.